Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radhan Hamad Ova Kunya Bihari Jayo Radhan Om Madhava Kunya Bihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya, all Snutadas at Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta, Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnav, Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Vilas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Vijay Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shaima Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuram Ki Jai Jagatha Swami Ki Jai Umanamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lalasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari. Krishna Prastaya, Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta, Samaniti Namani Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pacharani, Nivashesha Srinivadi Paschatya, Deshatarni. So Om Maganati Miranda Shagananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shigave Namaha. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge as I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, let's go on with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita, sorry. Let's get to the Bhagavad Gita. And we are on the 15th chapter. We're going to start with text 10 today. The Yoga of the Supreme Person. And remember the last few days we're talking about some very interesting subject matters. We started the 15th chapter off talking about how this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And how one can get out of this material world by becoming free of false prestige, nirmana moha jita sangha dosha, avyatma nicha vanivrita kama, free of lust, free of bad association, and dvandva, free of dualities, the concept of dualities, like sukha, dukkha, happiness and distress. And in such a way, you can go back to Godhead. But in the meantime, in this chapter, we found out that if you're in this world, you go from one body to another, taking your conceptions of life with you. That's called the astral or subtle body of mind, intelligence, and false ego, which you carry from one lifetime to another. And you get the type of body that you order in the body shop. That is, whatever your mentality is, that's the type of body you got. So don't blame Krishna for the type of body you have, because that's your karma, and that's your desire. So let's start again. Text 10. Utkramantam stitam vapi punjanam vagunanvitam vimudha nanupashanti pashanti gyada chakshushaha. Utkramantam, quitting the body. Stitam, situated in the body, va api, either. Bunjanam, enjoying, va, or. Guna anvitam, under the spell of the modes of nature, material nature. Vimudaha, foolish persons, na, never. Anupashanti, can see. Pashanti, can see. Jnana chakshushaha, those who have eyes of knowledge. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So in other words, this is the question that's most important in life. Who am I? What's going to happen at the time of death? Where am I going in the future? If someone doesn't ask those questions, they are, for all intents and purposes, not a human being. The word jnana chakshushaha is very significant. Without knowledge, okay, chakshusha means to see through knowledge. Just like, I mean, let's give an example of what it means to see through knowledge with a mundane example. Okay. Let's take an automobile engine. Okay? Now, if you don't have any knowledge about the workings of the automobile engine, you'll just look at it. And basically, all you know it's meant to make the car run. But if someone asks you where the carburetor is, where the spark plugs are, maybe spark plugs you'll know, you won't know. But because I, thank God, have knowledge about these things, when I look at an automobile engine, I don't just see like a mass of metal. I see exactly what's happening in the engine because I have knowledge. When you have knowledge, you actually see things differently. Like if you look at a tree, if you have knowledge, what do you see? Krishna conscious knowledge. You see there's a spirit soul, there's a super soul in that tree. Actually, Prabhupada was asked that very question. What do you see when you look at a tree? It's a poem. What do you see when you look at a tree? And Prabhupada was inquisitive. And Prabhupada said, I see Krishna in the heart of the tree, or wherever the tree's heart is. I see Krishna and I see the soul, and I see a soul suffering due to having that body of a tree. Like that. And so, just like I have these nice little animals outside my house, little squirrelies, and when I look at the squirrels, I just see them as suffering because they're just like so much anxiety. What are we going to eat during the winter? And they're harvesting all these different nuts and throwing the shells at my house. Anyway, so you see things according to your knowledge. It's a fact. If you don't have knowledge, you don't understand things. It's described even the primitive people in some of the Pacific Islands. They would see a ship, a Navy ship during World War II when the Japanese were fighting the Americans. They wouldn't understand what they were seeing because they had no knowledge of what a ship was or anything like that. Anyway, so knowledge is very important to understand how to see things properly. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he's going to take in the next life, nor even why he's living in a particular type of body. Doesn't understand a darn thing. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under certain circumstances, and he is enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell. There's that word spell again, of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Because of attachment, he suffers happiness, or enjoys happiness, and suffers distress. It's just an illusion. He's convinced. And that illusion is run by the great illusion master or mistress, Ayadevi. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that the spirit is different from the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditional life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. That's our message to everybody. That your suffering is due to attachment. The only way out of it is to become Krishna conscious, to become attached to Krishna, and then you can transfer yourself to the spiritual world. And this morning we were giving a very interesting class. We were talking about the process of Krishna consciousness, how it has to be executed on a daily basis with great attention, because if one is inattentive, what will happen? Then the material desires will creep back, the modes of nature will affect one, so many things will occur due to inattention. The weeds will grow. Right? What do I mean by weeds? Well, let's talk about the bhakti lata bij, which is the seed of the creeper of devotion, which is not a weed. And so it grows by the process of hearing and chanting. Now, if you're not attentive, just like when you're growing different things in your garden, if you're not attentive, weeds grow by the same watering process. And what are these weeds? Weeds are things like the weed of profit, adoration, distinction, pride. Because it's described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that anarthas can come. Anartha means things you don't want, impediments in devotional service like lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy. They can all come if one is not attentive in the process of bhakti yoga. And they come as the byproducts of that inattention bhakti yoga. What do I mean by byproducts? Let's say if you're a devotee for many years, or you joined the Hare Krishna movement 50 years ago like me, then people will respect you. You know the Bhagavad Gita, you know a few verses, you can throw a little Sanskrit around. Wow, you are so educated. And then you think, I am so educated. I am so proud. And there's actually stories about when devotees praised Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada just turned around and just went, Hare Krishna. Because he understood that it was Krishna acting through him. Of course, he deserved praise because he had surrendered to Krishna. Next verse. Yatanto yoginas chainam pashyant yatman yavastatam. Yatanto ya krit tatmano nainam pashyant yachetasaha. Yatantaha, endeavoring, yoginaha, transcendentalist, cha also. Evam, or enam, this, pashanti, can see, atmani, in the self, avastatam, situated, yatantaha, endeavoring, api, although, akrita atmanaha, those without self-realization, na, do not, edam, this, pashanti, see, achetasaha, having undeveloped minds. Translation, the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. So in other words, even endeavoring, let me turn this off so I don't get texts from all these people who think they can disturb me in the middle of class. Even endeavoring means you haven't reached perfection. You're just starting maybe, but you've gotten that knowledge from His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. You can see all this clearly. You know what happens at the time of death, you know what this body is, how the soul is transferred from one body to another. It's pretty simple stuff. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. Why can't they see what's taking place? Using their empirical instruments and empirical senses. Empirical means, you know, basically what you can see, what you can touch, what you can taste, what you can hear, like that. They can't, because what we're talking about is something that is far more subtle and, in many cases, spiritual. Subtle means like mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's still material, but it's subtle. We cannot perceive it with our scientific instruments or our senses. And the soul, what to speak of the soul? Obviously, you can't perceive that with your scientific instruments or senses. There are many transcendentalists on the path of self-realization, but one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yoginaha is significant in this connection. In the present day, There are many so-called yogis, and there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they are actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They are simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. They are called the tanto, ya kritat manaha. Even though they're endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, they are not self-realized. Such people cannot understand the process of the transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord, in other words, the Bhakti yogis, in those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. So we are so fortunate, by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we can understand, at least theoretically. We may not have realized all this stuff, through and through, but at least theoretically, we know we've been given the highest knowledge. And having been given the highest knowledge, we can have a discussion with the most erudite philosopher of this world and basically win the argument. Next text. Yadaditya gatam tejo jagat vashayate kilam Yaschandramamsi yachakno tatejo vidi mamakam. Yat, that which, aditya-gatam, in the sunshine, tejaha, splendor, jagat, the whole world, vasayate, illuminates, akilam, entirely, yat, that which, chandram, the sea, the moon, yat, that which, cha, also, agnav, in fire, tat, that, tejaha, splendor, vidi, understand, mamakam, for me. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. Sounds familiar? Aham sarvasya prabhu matak sarvam pravartate. Right? I am the source of everything. Right? And therefore everyone worships me. Not me, Krishna. Simple, we heard this many, many times before. The unintelligent cannot understand how things are taking place, but one can begin to be established in knowledge by understanding what the Lord explains here. Everyone sees the sun, moon, fire, and electricity. One should simply try to understand that the splendor of the sun, the splendor of the moon, and the splendor of electricity or fire are coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In such a conception of life, the beginning of Krishna consciousness lies a great deal of advancement. Krishna consciousness lies a great deal of advancement for the conditioned soul in this material world. The living entities are essentially the parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and he's giving here with the hint how they can come back to Godhead, back to home. In other words, whatever we see comes from Krishna. That's the point that Krishna is making, and Prabhupada is making in the purport. Aham sarvasya prabhu matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajantivam buddha-bhava-samamdata. From this verse, we can understand that the sun is illuminating the whole solar system. There are different universes and solar systems, and there are different suns, moons, and planets also, but in each and every universe there's only one sun. I guess we were talking about the solar system. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, text 21, the moon is one of the stars. Nakshatra namaham shashi. Sunlight is due to the spiritual effulgence in the spiritual sky of the Supreme Lord. With the rise of the sun, the activities of human beings are set up. They set fire to prepare their foodstuff. They set fire to start the factories, etc. So many things are done with the help of fire. Therefore, sunrise, fire, and moonlight are so pleasing to the living entities. Without their help, no living entity can live. So if one can understand the light and splendor of the sun, moon, and fire are emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, then one's Krishna consciousness will begin. In other words, everything comes from Krishna. Hang sarvasya prabhu matak sarvam prabhu. Hey, iti matva bhajantivam buddha-bhava-samamdata. And then because of that, once you understand that, what is that? Majjata prana. Bodhyantascha parasparam Katyantas Chamam Nicham Dushanti Cha Ramanti Cha. And what do? You begin talking about Krishna, enlightening one another, and deriving great satisfaction and bliss by doing that. Obviously. So these are the nutshell verses again. By the moonshine, all the vegetables are nourished. The moonshine. Now, this is not the moonshine that people drink. Sorry about that, folks. By the moonshine, all the vegetables are nourished. The moonshine is, what's that? Anyway, in America, moonshine means like some sort of alcohol that you make at home for drinking. By the moonshine, all the vegetables are nourished. The moonshine is so pleasing that people can easily understand that they are living by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Without his mercy, there cannot be sun. Without his mercy, there cannot be moon. And without his mercy, there cannot be fire. And without the help of the sun, moon, and fire, no one can live. These are some of the thoughts to devote Krishna consciousness in the conditioned soul. Sometimes it's mentioned by Krishna that the moon actually gives the flavor or taste to vegetables. And that's why when you eat vegetables that are grown in a, let's say, a greenhouse, or what you would call a hothouse, that are not exposed to the sun, they really don't taste so good, and they're lacking a lot of nutrition. Text 13. Dhamma Vishya Bhutani Tarayam Yahamojasa Pushnami Choshati Sarva Samubhutva Rasatmakaha. Dham, the planets of Vishya, entering, Cha, also Bhutani, the living entities, Tarayami, sustain, Aham, I, Ojasa, by my energy, Pushnami, am nourishing, Cha, and Oshadihi, vegetables, Sarva, all, Samaha, the moon, Bhutva, becoming Rasa Atmakaha, supplying the juice. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Exactly what I was just talking about. I sort of anticipated this verse. The moonshine actually is very cooling, and it gives nutrition to vegetables. So we need moonshine. I think it's really funny because this word moonshine, I just naturally think in terms of alcohol, homebrew alcohol, but it's not. It's the light of the moon. It is understood that all the planets are floating in the air only by the energy of the Lord. The Lord enters into every atom, every planet, and every living being. That is discussed in the Brahma Samhita. It is said that one plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, enters into the planets, the universe, the living entity, and even into the atom. So due to his entrance, everything is appropriately manifested. Of course, we know that's called the Shiradakshay Vishnu, Paramatma, Lord in the heart. We're all the same person. When the spirit soul is there, a living man can float on the water. But when the living spark is out of the body and the body is dead, the body sinks. Of course, when it is decomposed, it floats just like a straw and other things, but as soon as the man is dead, it at once sinks in the water. Similarly, all these planets are floating in space, and this is due to the entrance of the supreme energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His energy is sustaining each planet just like a handful of dust. If someone holds a handful of dust, there's no possibility of the dust falling. But if one throws it in the air, it will fall down. Similarly, these planets which are floating in the air are actually held in the fist of the universal form of the Supreme Lord. Remember the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita about the universal form. By his strength and energy, all moving and non-moving things stay in their place. It is said in the Vedic hymns that because of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sun is shining and the planets are steadily moving. Were it not for him, all the planets would scatter like dust in air and perish. Similarly, it is due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead that the moon nourishes all vegetables. Due to the moon's influence, the vegetables become delicious. Without the moonshine, the vegetables can neither grow nor taste succulent. Human society is working, living comfortably, and enjoying food due to the supply from the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, mankind could not survive. The word rasatmaka is very significant. Everything becomes palatable by the agency of the Supreme Lord through the influence of the moon. You may recognize this particular word, Rasatmaka is the first part of the word, rasa, which basically means taste. So that also refers, when we use the word rasa, to the taste that different people have in the spiritual world. Like some people have the taste of the conjugal relationship, some people have the taste of the parental relationship with Krishna, some people have the taste of the friendship relationship with Krishna, some people have the taste simply of the servitude relationship with Krishna, and some people have the taste of the awe and reverent relationship with Krishna. So that's rasa. But in the mature world, we also have rasa too. And of course, sorry about this, as Krishna states in the Gita, which we read in the chapter about the modes of nature, in the mode of passion, happiness in the mode of passion is like nectar in the beginning, and it's like poison at the end. So it's something like you eat something and it's delicious, but it has like a nasty residue in your mouth at the end, and it just stays there. So that's a rasa. And also there's a different rasa in relationships in this world. We also have relationships, as we've heard from this chapter about the upside down banyan tree, which is reflected, the banyan tree is reflected in the river, so it appears to be upside down, with its branches down and its roots headed up. So we have these rasas here. We have the taste of a relationship between friends, a taste of a relationship between our parents, a taste of a relationship with, conjugal love, like that. And so all these tastes here are perverted reflections of the tastes in the spiritual world. So that's why the tastes in the material world have a bitter ending to them. Oh my God. Tastes good, but it's like, oh my God. It's like, okay, when I was young, we would get these candies with a sugar coating on them, and it was actually chili pepper, something with chili peppers, a hot thing underneath. So that's the material world. So we put them in our mouths and go, delicious, sweet. And then after a while, after the sugar coating wore off, of course, when you're young, you take that as enjoyment. It's a little crazy. You take as enjoyment the burning sensation in your throat, and you run and you douse it with some water, and you hope to keep it away. And that's like the material world. There's a sugar coating on things. Sugar coating. And then when you go through that sugar coating, you get the hot pepper underneath. Okay, next text. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashrita Apranapana Sama Yukta Apanchanyanam Chaturvidam. Aham, I, Vaishvanaraha, my plenary portion as the digesting fire, Bhutva, becoming Praninam, of all living entities, Deham, in the bodies, Ashritaha, situated Prana, the outgoing air, Apana, the downgoing air, Samayuktaha, keeping in balance, Pat Chavi, I digest, Anam, foodstuff, Chatu, Vidam, the four kinds. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuffs. Prabhupada said at one point that because Krishna is the fire of digestion, if Krishna wants, you can digest nails and get nutrition from it. And then Prabhupada also commented that that's why the six Goswamis of Vrindavan and other very austere Vaishnavas were able to eat so little, like a pat of butter, a little buttermilk every 2 days, and maintain their lives and be able to write so many Vaishnav literatures. Whereas we need like tons of food just poured in just to satisfy our little senses and keep us alive. And on the fast day, it's like torture. We're just waiting for the moon to rise. And what's your Chinese appearance day? Or we are waiting for midnight, God forbid, midnight on Janmashtami. When will it come? The clock is going slower. So one who is actually Krishna conscious, the fire of digestion takes care of things, and You can eat one little chickpea and you get the nutrition. I mean, even scientifically, it's a fact. Like the atomic energy contained, even one atom, what to speak of a chickpea, is enough to keep you going for your whole life. And the body of a pure devotee, which has Krishna as the fire digestion. We have Krishna as the fire digestion too, but he's not so fired up in our bodies. Sorry about that pun. I am the fire digestion. So Krishna digests all these things. So we should remember that if we please Krishna. Also, Prabhupada said that if you like what you eat, you'll be healthy because you'll digest it. According to the Ayurvedas, here's something else about digestion. Not about this verse, but about Ayurvedic understanding of digestion. Digestion begins with the fingers and the nose. That's why in Krishna consciousness, unless we're seated at some table where everybody is like so-called sophisticated, we will generally eat with our fingers because that's part of signaling the body that something's coming and you better get those juices flowing. So we eat with our fingers, and that's the first thing. Then we smell, obviously, with our nose, and we taste with our tongue. And you're supposed to chew everything a lot of times. They said solid food, according to the Ayurveda, is supposed to be chewed about 20 times before you swallow it. And in this way, you'll digest things better. And that's a hint for all of you. So, of course, eating with the hands is not really respected in Western society. I remember one time I went to visit my mother and I started eating with my hands. I said, "What are you doing? We are not cannibals." And of course, at one point I told my mother she was a cannibal because she was eating meat, but that's another story. So according to Ayurvedic Shastra, we understand there is a fire in the stomach which digests all food sent there. When the fire is not blazing, there is no hunger. And when the fire is in order, we become hungry. Sometimes when the fire is not going nicely, treatment is required. In any case, this fire is representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedic mantras from the Brihad Aranayaka Upanishad 591 also confirm that the Supreme Lord, or Brahman, is situated in the form of fire within the stomach and is digesting all kinds of foodstuff. Ayam Agnir Vaishvanaro Yoyam Anta Purushe Yanedam Anam Pachayate. Therefore, since he is helping the digestion of all kinds of foodstuff, the living entity is not independent in the eating process. Unless the Supreme Lord helps him in digesting, there is no possibility of eating. He thus produces and digests foodstuff, and by his grace, we are enjoying life. In the Vedanta Sutra 1.2.27, this is also confirmed. Shabdadhivyo nta vipishtanascha. The Lord is situated within sound, within the body, within the air, and even within the stomach as the digestive force. There are 4 kinds of foodstuffs. Some are drunk, some are chewed, some are licked, and some are sucked. And he is the digestive force for all of them. Now, of course, you remember that verse in the Shikshashtika, not Shikshashtika, Gurvashtika, that we chant every morning. Chatur Vidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada. That the spiritual master sees the disciples are eating what? Bhagavad Prasada. Chatur Vidha, the 4 types, drunk, chewed, licked, and sucked. So, anyway, and he's very pleased by seeing that. Like Prabhupada was very pleased to see us taking prasadam. And this next text is one of the really key texts in the Bhagavad Gita, 15:15. Sarvasya chaham mriti sanavishto matak smritir jnanam aponam cha vedaischa saveraham evavedyo vedanta grid veda videva chaham sarvasya, of all living beings, cha and aham, I, mriti in the heart, sanavishtaha, situated, mata, from me, smritihi, remembrance, jnanam, knowledge, aponam, forgetfulness, cha and Vedai, by the Vedas, cha also, sarvahai, all, aham, I am, eva, certainly, Vedyaha, knowable, Vedanta Krit, the compiler of the Vedanta, Vedavit, the knower of the Vedas, eva, certainly, cha and aham, I, remember. Remember this verse. I am seated in everyone's heart. I think you all know that already. And from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And it comes, or this remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, comes because of our desire. We desire to forget Krishna. Okay, here's intelligence. We forget him. We desire to remember Krishna. Okay, we get that too. So he's reciprocating with our desires being in the heart. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. In other words, Krishna is the goal of the Vedas, or knowing Krishna is the goal of the Vedas. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So it's a very, very important point. Because as we've mentioned many times before, quoting from the Mahabharata, Tarka Pradishta Shutina Vivina, that the Vedas have many different branches, as we've often said, different shlokas, that means verses, for different folks, according to people's situation in, let's say, their spiritual advancement. Some people are not very spiritually advanced, therefore they have to be at least regulated and understand there's a superior authority. Some people want to eat meat, they have to be regulated. Offer to the goddess of Kali. The goddess Kali once a month. Okay, regulation. You accept authority, okay, you're accepting, at least indirectly, Krishna. And so, for those who are Krishna conscious, they have higher injunctions. So, there's different injunctions for different people, like we mentioned before, in the pharmacy, the pharmacopoeia, drugstore. There's different drugs for different people according to their degree of sickness or health. So the Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of its past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. In other words, you may not remember your past deeds. You may not remember what your state of consciousness is, but Krishna reminds you of your state of consciousness. He may not tell you about all your past deeds. You go crazy if you knew about them all. Required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Krishna arranges that we forget about all the nonsense we did in the past. Thus, the Lord is not only all-pervading, he's also localized in every individual heart. He awards the different fruitive results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, that means in the heart, but as the form of the incarnation of the Vedas as well. The Vedas are actually manifest from Krishna's breathing, and they're considered an expansion from Krishna. The Vedas give the right direction to people so they can properly mold their lives and come back to home, back to Godhead. The Vedas offer knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and Krishna in his incarnation of Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. The word Vyasa means to divide the Vedas, because the Vedas are eternal. Originally they were one. Vyasa divided them into four. And then later on, the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, the histories, the Puranas. So the commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva in the Srimad Bhagavatam gives the real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. So let me explain what the Vedanta Sutra is, so everybody can understand. Vedanta Sutra is a sutra. Sutra means a thread, basically. But what it is, it's very short statements that indicate to those who have some knowledge what direction they should go in to search for the absolute truth. Of course, the Vedanta Sutra begins with the Tato Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the time to look for the absolute truth. And these short statements are connected with different verses of the Upanishads. So in a very real sense, we can say the Vedanta Sutra is actually Cliff's Notes. Many of you don't know what Cliff's Notes is. Cliff's Notes, anyway, I'll explain what Cliff's Notes is. When you go to the university, you're given books to read, right? And some of us are too lazy to read those books. So we buy summaries of those books so we don't have to read those books. I remember I did that. Because there were all these stupid novels I had to read and report on. So I thought, why am I going to read this stupid 300-page novel about some stupid love story? Who cares about Romeo, Juliet? And so we would buy this summary, which is probably about 20 pages instead of 300 pages. And the summary would indicate everything that happened in the book. And what? Savings in time. So Vedanta Sutra is not exactly written to save you time, but it's sort of like a summary of the Upanishads and certain sutras in the Vedanta Sutra, short, pithy statements, can be connected with certain verses in the Upanishads. And so, in order to explain the Vedanta Sutra, which is an explanation or a shortened version of the Upanishads, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called the mature commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Also, we have other commentaries written by acharyas, like Sripad Ramanujacharya, the head of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, the Lakshmi Sampradaya. He wrote what's called the Sri Bhashya. Bhashya means like a commentary. So that means Lakshmi's commentary. Sri is another name of Lakshmi. So he wrote that as a commentary. Whereas we Gaudiyas have as our primary commentary the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in addition, we have the other commentary that was written by Baladev Vijayabhushan, at least was spoken by Govinda, the deity of the Radha Govinda fame, to Baladev Vijayabhushana, and that's called the Govinda Bhashya. All right? And so I told the story about that Govinda Bhashya in the past class, how he wrote it because he was challenged by some people who didn't believe that Radha and Krishna could be worshipped together, and didn't believe that we Gaudiyas were actually bona fide, and didn't accept that the Srimad Bhagavatam was the mature commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So he wrote that as Krishna dictated. So those are the commentaries in the Vedanta Sutra. Okay. The Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, he is the supplier and digester of foodstuff, the witness of his activity, the giver of knowledge in the form of the Vedas. In other words, Krishna is with us at every minute. He's in our heart, in the stomach, in every atom, in the brain, giving us knowledge, helping us forget things, witnessing our activities. I mean, how can you avoid him? And as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and he's the teacher of Bhagavad Gita. He is worshipable by the conditioned soul. Thus, God is all good, God is all merciful, and God, in one sense, is everywhere. Anta pravishta shashta jnanam. The living entity forgets as soon as he quits his present body, but he begins his work again, initiated by the Supreme Lord. Although he forgets, the Lord gives him the intelligence to renew his work where he ended in his last life. Let's say I was a great piano player, they're called pianists. So then next life, even at 4 or 5 years old, I'm going, like you see in the case of many of these masters, the music masters, artistic personalities, it's from one life to another. Even their talents, they can take from one life to another, what to speak of their propensities. So not only is the living entity enjoy or suffer in this world according to the dictation from the Supreme Lord, situated locally in the heart, but he receives the opportunity to understand the Vedas from him. If one is serious about the understanding of Vedic knowledge, then Krishna gives the required intelligence. What does Krishna say? Tesham sadadiyuktanam bhajatam pradipurvakam idamai buddhihakam tam yenamam upiyanti. To those who are dedicated and worship me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. The next verse, I dwell in their hearts, destroy with a shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge for understanding? Because the living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. We need to understand Krishna. Vedic literature confirms this. Yosal Sarvar Vedara Giyate. In all Vedic literature, beginning from the 4 Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads and Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated. By performance of Vedic rituals, discussion of the Vedic philosophy, and worship of the Lord in devotional service, he is attained. Therefore, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. The Vedas give us direction by which to understand Krishna. and the process of realizing him, the ultimate goal is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I just thought of another example as I was reading that helps us understand, a metaphorical example, helps us understand how things that are apparently not related are actually related. And that's the process of education that we're undergoing, or the children undergo. Let's say a child goes to nursery school or kindy, and he learns how to play with blocks. And you may think, how does that have anything to do with getting a PhD? Well, it has everything to do because it's preliminary. Unless you learn how to play with blocks and know the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc., then you're never going to be able to progress. So step by step, step by step. However, with devotional service, because we know that the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, we don't have to go through all the steps. We don't have to play with baby blocks, so to speak, metaphorically. We can actually directly take up devotional service, a whole bata swapachital. Garyanya jivagre vartate namatubhyam, tapus Jehovah shar sna aryar, Ramanujanama Granantiyate. That one chants the holy name, it's understood. He's done all these preliminary Vedic things. Vedanta Sutra confirms, 1.1.4 confirms this in the following words. Tat tu samanvayat. One can attain perfection in 3 stages. By understanding Vedic literature, one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By performing the different processes, one can approach him, and at the end, one can attain the supreme goal. Now, what does that sound like to you? The 3 stages of knowledge. What is that? Sambandha, Avideya, Prayojana. Remember, we talked about that many, many times before. Sambandha means understanding the relationship with the Supreme Lord, understanding the relationship with the material energy, understanding the relationship with time, understanding the relationship with karma, understanding the soul. So that's Sambandha, which is just mentioned here. And then once you understand it, by performing the different processes, yoga, that's Abhideya, one can approach him. And then at the end, one can attain the supreme goal, which is Prayojana. That's exactly what Prayojana means. Who is no other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, the understanding of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas are clearly defined. And we will take questions at this particular juncture. Hold on a second. I will take you off of mute. You are now officially allowed to unmute yourselves. Okay, who has a question? Madhava, you have a question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I have 2 questions. One from yesterday I couldn't ask because time ran out, and that was when Krishna's abode, supreme abode, he said self-lit. It is not lit by sun or moon or things like that. So my question is, how do we get, there is a dark, also the night happens, daytime, self-lit, so is there night also happens there in supreme abode?
That's actually a very good question. You know, night happens. I mean, obviously, if everything is so bright, you can't see distinctions. Just like if you have something, a bright light. The question he's asking is really interesting. Let's say if there's something super, super bright, then you no longer see anything. It's just like darkness in this material world, right? If something is super, 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 super bright. Like if you look at the sun, for example, if you look at the sun, don't look at the sun, you're going to burn your eyes. But if you did look at the sun, everything is super bright. So you would have to have some sort of filter to actually cut down the amount of sunlight. And actually, the first time the scientists were really able to understand, that is, the circumference of the sun, was during an eclipse, where the moon actually blocked the sun, and they were able to block a lot of the sunlight so they could actually see all the different things happening around the outside of the sun. So it's an interesting question. Well, the light in the spirit, the answer to that is the light in the spiritual world, although we can compare it to the light in this world, is not exactly the same thing. It's actually a spiritual light. In the material world, just talking scientifically, because you're a scientist, Material light is actually certain wavelengths. I mean, it's a scientific phenomena, just like you have different wavelengths of different types of energy. And as you decrease the wavelength, or increase the frequency, then you get violet, ultraviolet, and then you come into the aspects of the spectrum. Sorry for those of you who are not scientists that you can't see. So you have the frequency increases and the wavelength decreases. Anyway, whatever. Guess you don't understand it. Anyways, that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's just a material phenomena. So we try to explain spiritual phenomena using different material examples. But really, it's not a complete one-to-one correspondence between every point. Just like we try to explain how Krishna is everything by saying how the sunshine is everything, like Prabhupada example, how the sun is localized, has a deity within the sun. It's a metaphor. Metaphors are useful when they come as close as possible to that which they are illustrating, but they are never wholly and solely identical with that which they are illustrating. So we have to understand that many times we use metaphors. Like we say, the spirit soul is like a spark of the original fire. When the spirit soul falls out of the fire, it gets less and less, its illumination decreases. These are simply metaphors. So in the spiritual world, the light that is there is not material light. That's the point. And that light, somehow or other, you can see different, even though everything's light, very, very bright, you could still see different things. And even though everything is light, very, very light, you still have nighttime.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And if you ask for further explanation from me,
that's okay.
I have to defer to the word achintya at this particular point.
Thank you.
Which
One more question, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj. One more question.
Yeah, achintya is definitely a devotee cop-out word. Yeah, so anyway, but that's the best I can do. Yeah, what's the next question?
Thank you, Maharaj. Yes, thank you, Maharaj. One more question from today's verse. When Krishna says one of the important verse that actually has knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness, everything comes from me. So whether a devotee or a non-devotee, Krishna is always there in everyone's heart, whether one knows or one doesn't know, whether devotee, non-devotee. But then what happens, either a devotee or non-devotee, we tend to forget. We lose memory as we age. When we are young, whether devotee or non-devotee, Krishna is always there. But when we start aging, we naturally start forgetting things. So is the factor of age? How do we understand this?
Well, it's just like, all right, let's give an example of a light. That a light has a filter. So the brain is like filtering the consciousness. So as it gets old, the filter gets a little yellow. It's like if you have a filter on a light bulb, and then the filter starts to get yellow and it transmits less and less and less light. I'll give you an example. Actually, this is a practical example in my own life. That was probably about 4 years ago. I was having trouble seeing. You remember this. I was having trouble seeing things when it was a little dark out. So I go to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor says, your lenses have cataracts in them. Now, some of us old people have had cataract surgery. And so the doctor said, oh, you have cataracts. And I said, what should I do, my dear doctor? And she said, sorry, it's a lady doctor. Ladies are better at doctoring than men. Men don't know what to do. Anyway, so there's a lady doctor. I don't know if the lady can't watch it. But anyway, so the lady doctor, and she said, you need a surgery, cataract surgery. So I said, oh my God. I thought I had spiritual vision. And she said, has nothing to do with your spiritual vision, Maharaj. You should take care of it by going. So I went, all of a sudden he went into the operating theater. They wheeled me in. Actually, I was fully conscious, which is a problem. I kept telling them, you didn't give me any anesthesia, Prabhus. And I was fully aware of everything that was happening, even experiencing the pain. But they had me tied down. So anyway, it was an interesting experience. And then when I came back from the operating theater and they took away the patch, I could see colors and everything again. So my eyes were fully functioning. It was just the lens in the eye that was actually clouded. So in the same way, there's several factors that have to do with memory. Now, here, when we talk about the super soul giving you memory, it's not exactly, memorizing what you did as a little baby or memorizing Sanskrit verses. That's really not what's mentioned. The super soul gives you memory and direction in terms of your intelligence, which is different than just remembering details. That's another point of view. In other words, let's say if I try to learn Hindi and I can't learn Hindi, it's all super soul's fault. It's not, it's just that my brain may not be ready for it. Another thing is when you take up Krishna consciousness, then I have not experienced my brain deteriorating as I've taken up Krishna consciousness, and I'm really old. Incredibly old. So I have not experienced any deterioration of the brain. In fact, I think I can remember things probably better than I did when I was young because of the lifestyle. But in any case, and you see with Prabhupada was never old because Prabhupada is a spirit soul. I am not a spirit soul, so I get old. But anyway, so Prabhupada was lying there getting ready to leave this world. And he was remembering everything and he was dictating his Bhaktivedanta purports. So that's also another factor, pleasing Krishna. However, I would not blame Super Soul for the lack of memory that we may experience due to physical conditions. Because the brain is simply filtering things, but the Super Soul memory, forgetfulness, Super Soul giving memory, forgetfulness, and knowledge is actually on a different level than just like remembering what your name is or something like that. It's remembering your goal in life, your direction, and knowledge of Krishna. So that's the point. Like you may forget certain verses, but you remember Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hope that explains that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, anyway, if there's any doubt, just use the cataract example.
Thank you.
Actually, after I had cataract surgery, I was just amazed how colorful the world was. You actually forget it when you get old and you need cataracts and you have cataracts in your eyes and it's just like, wow, look at all those colors. Amazing. So I'm sure some of you who are on this in this class have actually had cataract surgery, so you can relate with that. So Prabhupada also mentions cataracts. I don't think Prabhupada ever had cataract surgery. So who else has a question?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Okay, Ujjwala.
Yes, then it's you, Maharaj. Yeah. I have a quick, sorry, Maharaj.
It's good to hear from you.
Yes, pleasure, Maharaj, pleasure. This is an off-topic question, but I thought you might be able to give an answer because of the gravity of the question. Maharaj, see, when a devotee that has practiced for quite some time, say 10-20 years, second initiated also, performing yajna, and so basically interacting with the devotee congregation, performing yajna, steadily situated in the sadhana, all of a sudden we come to know that particular devotee, if we come to know that particular devotee committed suicide. Yes. First thing is, I mean, when my children asked me that question, I was trying to give some answer, but I thought I will just hear from you, because not, that particular person is not just a devotee that is starting to practice or not know the philosophy or not grounded spiritually. All that has evidently has happened, but still, just how to understand this one,
Okay.
Maharaj.
That's a good question. Without knowing that particular individual, I think I know who you're talking about. But without knowing that particular individual, what I would say is that uh, unless one is an absolutely pure devotee of the Lord, in which case nothing can deter them from their spiritual path, there is a certain amount of stress, anxiety that can cause anyone to crack. I mean, just like, I mean, let's talk about Bart Maharaj. Bart Maharaj was on a very high level of devotional service, and he deviated because of his attachment for a little baby deer. But that means, even on the platform of Bhava, and this is not to take away from that particular devotee, I'm sure he or she was a very elevated soul. But until you get to the platform of pure devotional service, absolute pure devotional service, a certain amount of stress, can cause you to crack at that point. So how to avoid that? The natural question is, what went wrong? Why did that devotee do that? My answer, without knowing the specifics of the case, is that the devotees have to continually have relationships to such an extent that they're able to reveal their minds to others. Confidence. Now, I would say, like, without knowing details, this is just an educated guess, that had this devotee revealed his or her mind in confidence to someone who they trusted and was able to understand the stress, obviously it's stress for an advanced devotee, then they wouldn't have taken that particular step. And I know, and I encourage the devotees, we hear in the Upadeshamrita, what is it? Gadati pratigranati guyamakyati prichati bhunkte bhojate chaiva. That a devotee is supposed to reveal their mind in confidence. But the problem is that many people, many devotees, do not have that sort of relationship with others. They're afraid of doing that. And I mean, just being frank, sometimes in the Indian culture, there's not that sort of type of interaction because one is afraid of being denigrated or chastised or something like that. I mean, I remember, it's a little bit of a funny story. It involves me. That when I was a brahmachari, a very young brahmachari, 50 years ago, I was traveling with a sannyasi and I said, can I reveal my mind to you? And he said, what's the use of whatever's in your mind? And so, I mean, that's very painful. It's very painful. That's why I remember that statement like it was yesterday. And we all need, I think your question is actually an extremely important question, and it points out the need for all of us to have at least one other person that we can go to when our stress level gets high. And I'm not talking just about suicide. I'm talking about a high stress level, because I think it's quite normal for any of us to be subjected to a high stress level. And we need other souls. I mean, we may not be at the level where you can just go to the deities and say, Krishna, I'm revealing my mind to you. This is too much for me. So we need that. And, I know people sometimes, they write letters to me about their high stress levels. And it's just normal. unless we have a way to take care of that stress, it can actually come to the point where we start to have suicidal ideation. And of course, and if we don't reveal our minds, then, I mean, obviously, if someone reveals their mind to me and says, I'm really planning out how to commit suicide, I will refer them to professionals at that point. That is that. But if someone is just talking to me about their stress levels, I can deal with that. But if it actually comes to that point, so that indicates to me, and if it's the person who I'm thinking about, and the same person who I'm thinking about, that nobody had any inkling, that means any particular indication that he was going to do, or even felt like that.
Right.
So that means the lack was actually the lack of people who could just reveal his mind to. I mean, maybe he had like working relationships with other devotees, even friendships with other devotees, but nothing deep enough. So therefore, I have to stress again that we need that sort of. Does that make sense?
So, yes, Maharaj. So I was just thinking, I mean, when something like this happens for the rest of the devotees congregation, whoever is getting to know Krishna consciousness and whoever is practicing also, I'm thinking, okay, how can this be applied to rest of us, the devotees who are trying to. So one thing is, as you mentioned, yes, stress will be there even for the devotees, for the sadhakas. Second thing is not just the stress, but it can go to such an intensity that one would contemplate of hurting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if the devotees are aware of this fact, then they would not be looked down, or they will not feel hesitated to reveal this. Yeah, because we often hear in the classes, devotees everywhere, the expectation bar is set high. So it is possible that people either might think that it is not normal to feel this way, so they may be hesitating to reveal. But yeah, when it comes from an authority like you, then the practicing devotees will be able to understand what to expect and then what to do about it also. So in other words, yes, this can happen in the spiritual journey, just that the risk of committing suicide when somebody is depressed may come down for somebody who is in the spiritual journey as opposed to who is not in the spiritual journey. But yes, there can be a chance if necessary actions are not taken. Right? Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay. And therefore, each and every devotee should have someone they can reveal their mind. We should make sure.
Yeah.
And it's not a negative if you're in stress. I mean, anybody can be in stress. I mean, come on. I mean, even, Prabhupada sometimes was in a lot of anxiety. I mean, not to that point, but Prabhupada was in anxiety. That's stress too. When he sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to get the land in Mayapur, he was in anxiety something was going to happen with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he couldn't sleep because he was stressed out. So it's not bad to be in stress.
Yeah.
And it's not bad, and we have to be ready to not criticize someone for being in stress, because it's just any of us can be in stress. Of course, I just yell at my computer when I get in stress. But anyway.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I haven't broken my computer yet. The computer is not committed suicide. But anyway, no, but seriously speaking, we should all have someone we can go to and say, this is too much. I can't take it anymore. What am I going to do? Whatever is bothering us. We all need therapists. It doesn't reflect badly because you have a therapist, somebody to reveal your mind to.
Yeah. But if we look at this thing, Maharaj, one should feel like doing it also. And that would happen when we hear around that it is okay to feel like that. Otherwise, even if there is somebody to go to, then they may not necessarily go because of the stigma or because of bars that is set high like that. But this is helpful, Maharaj. Yeah.
Yes, it's okay to be so stressed out You just want to end it all. I mean, that's, and if it comes to the point of suicidal ideation, ideation means you're actually starting to plan it, then you
Yeah.
need professional help.
Mhm.
Not just you go
Yes.
to a devotee, you need professional help. And I have actually, in the past, I have signed papers to commit people to the hospital when I felt that they were at that point.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. We're in the material world. The whole place is stressful anyway.
Mhm.
I mean, it's so damn stressful. I mean, you can't imagine how stressful it is. And sometimes things just come one after the other and just like pile on you every day.
Mhm.
And that becomes really stressful. Anyway, it's not wrong to
Thank
say
you.
you're stressed out or to talk to someone about it before it gets to that point. And if it does get to that point, then don't be embarrassed.
Yeah,
Don't be
Maharaj.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Talk about it in confidence. Thank you. That's actually a
Thank
very
you.
good question and a very practical thing, and hopefully that will save some devotee in the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, because we're persons. We have feelings. I mean, don't think just because you're a devotee you don't have feelings. You don't feel lonely. You don't feel stressed. You don't feel hungry.
Yeah.
We got feelings like everybody else. We got needs like everybody else. Like right now, I'm thirsty, so I'm getting ready to end class. So what? I said, oh, he's in Maya. He's thirsty. He shouldn't give in to the pushings of the tongue and the belly, whatever. Oh my God, he's thirsty. I'm thirsty. Too bad. If you don't like it, tough. So anyway, so be honest.
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj. I'll
Oh, thank
pass
you.
on
All right.
message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. So we have to end now. See everybody tomorrow. Same time, same station. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.